Okay, class, picking up where we left off at, we were supposed to fill in that this is the identity line, which is y is equal to x. Okay, now we scroll to the next page. It says, finding the equation of the inverse functions, use the fact that an inverse function, x and y values trade roles. Write the given function in the form of y is equal to f of x. Okay, we will solve this equation for x first. We will swap the x's and y's and rewrite using inverse function notation. So let's go through this step by step. The first thing we want to do is, just to make it a little easy for us in the beginning, make f of x just y. So we'll have y is equal to x minus 4 over 3 minus 5. Now we're going to switch back to the f of x portion when we get to the end of our problem. So now, step one, we want to basically get the x by itself, solve the equation for x. So we will add 5 on both sides. So we will have y plus 5 is equal to x minus 4 over 3. Now we have to get rid of this divided by 3 on both sides. So we multiply each side by 3. And that will give us 3y plus 15 is equal to, these 3's will simplify out, and it'll be x minus 4. Now we will add 4 on both sides. So we will have 3y plus 19 is equal to x. Now, our third step is this here. We will switch the x's and y's. So this would become 3x plus 19 is equal to y. Now finally, our fourth step, we want to write this in the inverse notation or interval notation. So it'll be f inverse of x. And remember, that replaces your y value, equals to 3x plus 19. So that is our final answer. And you could write something like this. You could say the inverse function of f of x is equal to x minus 4 over 3 minus 5. This is just a reminder. You don't have to write this additional part, but this is actually the final answer here. Okay, now you can, and let me just write this also, you can verify this and you could test it. I'm going to draw a line here just to let you know that this is just some extra that I'm putting here. You could test by verifying AB is on F, so BA is on the inverse of F. So basically, if we took this problem here, and let's say I wanted to use 1 for x. Let's just use this with the original equation. So we know 1 minus 4, well, I could do it here. 1 minus 4 we know is negative 3 over 3 minus 5. Negative 3 minus 3 will give you negative 1 minus 5, which is negative 6. So we know our f of x would be negative, or our f of 1. Our f of 1 would equal negative 6. So in order for this to be true, if we took this value here, negative 6 comma 1 should work with the inverse function. So let's see if that works out. If we put in negative 6 for x here, so let me write this down here. If we put in negative 6 for x, we will add 3 times negative 6. It should be plus 19. So it'll give us negative 18 plus 19, which is 1. So actually, I should have wrote the F inverse. I didn't leave myself enough room here. But we know that this is supposed to be F inverse of negative 6. So that would give us this positive 1 here. So it does work. If we put in negative 6 for x, we do end up with 1. So that's a way of verifying it, but you don't necessarily have to do that. But that is a good way of checking it. So now we go to the next page. We have finding the inverse function of the mathematical model. Now this is based on real world info or data. When we do a modeling problem, the variable names are usually chosen because they remind us of what the variable represents. Therefore, the step where we swap the x's and y's is eliminated. Write the given function in the form dependent variable is equal to f of x, which is equal to f of the independent variable. It says solve this equation for the independent variable, rewrite using inverse function notation. Okay, it says the formula for converting temperatures from the Celsius scale to the Fahrenheit scale is F is equal to 9/5 times the Celsius plus 32. We can write this in function notation by writing F is equal to G of C, which is equal to 9/5 C plus 32. So now, find an equation for the inverse function G inverse by hand. What does the inverse function do? Okay, so we want to take this formula here, and we would start off, we would have F is equal to 9/5 times C plus 32. Now, we want to get C by itself. So first we will subtract 32 on both sides. So we will have F minus 32 is equal to 9/5 times C. Now we will multiply each side by the reciprocal of 9/5, which is 5/9. Because remember, we're still trying to get C by itself. So we have 5/9 times the Fahrenheit minus 32 is equal to C. Now, what we will have here, remember, this C represents the inverse function. So we will write this as G, the inverse, is equal to 5/9 times the Fahrenheit minus 32. Now, what this does, in answer to this question, it takes the Fahrenheit, the degrees Fahrenheit, and turns it into degrees Celsius temperature. Now that is basically what does the inverse function do. This is what the inverse function does. Okay, now we have B. It says find G of 45. Now what we need to do is we will go back into the original equation and we will substitute in 45. So remember, it was the function, or Fahrenheit, was equal to 9/5 times x, or, well, actually I should put C, times C plus 32. So we will have F is equal to 9/5. We know the 45 represents C plus 32. Now, after you put this in your calculator, it will end up giving you 113 degrees. And that will be your final answer. So, now we go to C. It says find the inverse of G of 45 and explain what it means in this situation. So basically, what this means is this here. What temperature in degrees Celsius is 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I should have wrote this up here, but I'm going to write this now. This actually meant, before we wrote this, what temperature in degrees Fahrenheit is 45 degrees Celsius. That's why we were able to substitute in 45 for our C. Now, we're going to substitute in 45 for our F. So remember, we need to write down the inverse formula, which is C is equal to 5/9 times the Fahrenheit minus 32. So we will have C is equal to 5/9. The Fahrenheit is 45 degrees minus 32. Now, once you put this in your calculator, your Celsius would be basically approximately 7.2 if we rounded it, or exactly 7.2 with the repeating 2 degrees Celsius. So it just depends. If we rounded it, actually I should have, let me write it here. Or we could write C is equal to 7.2 repeating decimal degrees Celsius. And this here also is degrees Celsius. So either one of these answers would suffice. Now, we scroll to the next page. It says here, example 5, the number of single women households in the U.S., one-person female households in the U.S. Census has been steadily increasing since the 1970s. Now it says here, find a reasonable model for W is equal to F of T for these data using regression, where W represents the number of single women households in millions T years after 1970. So we will use regression for this formula here. Now, what we will have is this here. This is since the 1970s. So what we would need to do is we would need to acknowledge that, well, actually it says after 1970. So we would need to know our years. We know first our years is 5, then this would be 10, 15, then we will have 20, 25, 30, 35, and then 39. This will actually be our T. Now, if we look here, we have our household in the millions. If you notice here, it's steadily growing. Now, we need to put this in our calculator and do the regression formula, and we would end up with W is equal to F of T is equal to 0.245 T plus 8.545. Now remember, we're only rounding to 3 decimal places. And remember, this is a decimal, 8.545. Now, we go here to B. It says find an equation for the inverse of F by hand. So we need to take this formula here. We know that F of T is equal to W, which is equal to 0.245 T plus 8.545. Now what we're going to end up doing, we need to solve for T. So we're going to subtract 8.545 on both sides. Now remember, we just wrote the F of T here just to signify that we know that this is the function of T, but we're really only dealing with W and T here. So we add W minus 8.545 is equal to 0.245 T. And then we have to divide each side by 0.245. And we will have, on the right side, we will have T because these 0.245 simplify out. And we add W minus 8.545 all over 0.245.